Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. The modern release that I want to look at today is Thomas Was Alone. This is a game that has crossed my radar so many times and I've passed it up so many times. And now I feel so sad that I didn't experience this game earlier. I saw it on the PlayStation Store for 99 cents with the DLC costing another like 34 cents or something like that. And I just couldn't pass it up. I thought, you know what, I think it was $1.31 after everything was said and done. Something ridiculously cheap. And I bought it, and I had the time of my life. This is one of the best indie experiences I have ever played, and I can't believe how they married so many elements together to create something that's not only like greater than the sum of its parts, but exponentially so. So let's talk about what Thomas Was Alone. Because if you're not familiar with it, I wasn't super familiar with it. It is at its basic core a puzzle platformer. You play as Thomas, a little red rectangle, who meets some other red rectangles. They are little AIs, as it is. The opening will show, like, of each chapter will show a blurb of text reading from a software developer for whatever this is that they're developing, and it talks about the AI that becomes sentient essentially. And Thomas was the first here. And the beginning thing has a narrator speaking and says Thomas was alone, and that's a curious thought to have, something along those lines. And you just platform your way around and you find a little portal that's the shape of Thomas, and it warps you to a new zone. So the basic premise of the game is you're going from one area to the next, trying to find these portals. And that's pretty much it. As you continue on, you will meet other rectangles and sometimes little squares. The first one that Thomas meets is Chris, a little orange square that is irritated with Thomas. Doesn't like his peppy nature, the way he jumps around. Chris is more squatty and doesn't jump as far and clearly doesn't have the same disposition as Thomas. What makes this game so interesting is that these are just a bunch of rectangles. They have no faces, they have no dialogue. The only thing you get to hear is the voice of the narrator, who does a spectacular job. I'm losing the name off the top of my mind, but they did a phenomenal job with this game. And they give you a little insight as to what these characters are thinking. Thomas does have that more pep. He's more optimistic. He's writing down all of his observations. He wants to explore the world. Chris is a little grumpier, and when he meets Thomas, he's not particularly fond of him, doesn't want to be around him that much. But they need each other, once they meet each other, to solve the puzzle and move forward. And then more characters are introduced. One named John, who's a really thin yellow rectangle that can jump super high. You'll meet Claire, a big blue square that can float in the water where no one else can. You'll meet Claire, who's a little pink rectangle. It's very flat, can't jump very high, but she's essentially a trampoline, and many other ones as well. Each of them have their own unique personality, their own goals and ambitions. And again, the way that this works is that every stage that you go to, the narrator will give you a little blurb as to what's going on. And it's so brilliantly done and so brilliantly performed, you kind of fill in the cracks between each level. You kind of get that their relationship is between each other is forming and building and becoming something. And it's a really genius way. The dialogue lines are not very long. It brings them up in text so you can see what they're saying. And it's just so eloquently done. The music is perfect as well. It's gorgeously scored. It's very fitting for each area that you go to, each character that's introduced. The score tends to reflect those new characters that you come across, some of the ominous tones that come in later on when you meet this pixel cloud that's kind of looming in the background that's a little bit interesting there. It's just so many elements brought together to form a beautiful picture. Like I said before, this is just a puzzle platformer. If that's all it was, this would be a great game. It is very competent. I think the puzzles work very, very well. You take control of each of the rectangles, you can swap between them freely, and you use them to platform to different spots. You sometimes have to solve some more intricate puzzles, hit buttons, and stuff like that to get to the right portal setup so that you can leave the level. I think it's very ingeniously done in terms of just its puzzle platforming, but then you add the layers of complexity on top with the dialogue and the conflicts and the relationships between these AI models and their aspirations, and again, all you're seeing is these little rectangles, but you feel their characters, you feel that they're real, and it's a really gorgeous thing. I think that the writing is some of the most superb writing I've ever seen in an indie game for sure. Maybe in any video game that I can think of as of late. And that's something to be said. There are so many games that have such marvelous dialogue. This game's only a couple hours long. You can buy this game and get so much out of it in just a few hours. And again, it's worth like the $31 or $34 that I paid for it. 100% worth your time for just that. But I would pay full price for this game if I knew how phenomenal it was right off the bat, because it's just such a pleasure to experience. There were times at the very beginning of the game, the first few chapters, I was grinning from ear to ear. I have never been just so pleased at what a game was. The dialogue was absolutely enchanting. It drew me in so much. And I love puzzle platformers, so if you like that, this is definitely the game for you. But then adding that dialogue and the music in the background, just bringing everything together, I was just smiling so much. And then it starts to get some more ominous tones, some more like conflict between the characters. And I found myself getting like a little bit stressed, like a little bit of tension that I could feel in the air. And then you get more characters introduced into it, and it just, everything comes together so perfectly. I won't spoil the story for you since it is so cheap right now. I think it's through the middle of March. It's on the sale on the PlayStation Store, at least. I'm not sure about the other shops. I'd imagine they go on sales all the time. This is I think a decade-old game at this point. $10 at the most when it like its retail price. But I won't spoil the story for you. But I will say that the way that this story unfolds and the way that the relationships come to their natural conclusion with each other is just fantastic. Again, the writing is just something superb. The music underscores it perfectly, and the platforming does get exponentially harder as the game goes on. It doesn't ever reach anything too crazy. It's not a super difficult game, but it doesn't need to be. And that's what makes this game so special. It's just enough challenge, just enough length. It's concise enough that it does not overstay its welcome in any way, shape, or form. I didn't find myself like longing for more of this game. Like if they had more, I absolutely would have loved to play it. But I think they tell the story so beautifully and they wrap it up so cleanly. And then the DLC is its own separate story about a cube named Benjamin, whose father and his father go to see this fountain of light, which is in the base game as well that you learn about. And they want to go and see this fountain. They've been trying to get closer and closer to it, but they've never been able to reach it. And so Benjamin's father makes a jetpack for him, completely upending like all the stuff you did in the previous, in like the base game. Now all of a sudden you can fly around, and you'll get a character from the base game in the DLC that you get to get some more insight on prior to them joining the crew in the base game. It's really beautiful. It feels very much like Icarus and Daedalus in terms of like Benjamin ends up like wanting to take the jetpack and going off by himself to see the fountain. I think they did a really good job of kind of making that story and bringing it into the world of Thomas Was Alone, and give us a couple extra chapters to kind of give us insight into these other AIs that are doing their own thing as well. Overall, this game is just something really special and phenomenal. Again, if you haven't heard of it before, or you've heard of it but didn't know what it was, this is one of the most special games that you could play, especially for the price. Again, under $2, you get something really phenomenal. I think it's about 12 chapters worth of content, few hours of your time, and the best thing too is I didn't notice in my very first playthrough, I was so engrossed in the story. At one point I noticed a little blip, a little sound effect go off. I couldn't figure out why. I saw the little thing, I'd hit something, and it was a little black square that's fairly innocuous. You don't notice it, at least I didn't on my first playthrough. They're called little trophies. And there are 2 per chapter, sprinkled throughout in various parts of the chapter. It's not always consistent. It's not always this level within the chapter. You just have to find 2 of them. And I found in my trophies list, oh, if I find 2 trophies in each of these things, that'll pop that. And so I went right back into the game. I've been playing through it again, and it's just a joy. It's absolutely a joy. If you haven't played it yet, this is well worth your time. One of the best sales you can get. Some of the best few hours of your life for just a couple bucks. I highly recommend Thomas Was Alone. I'm going to be giving this one a very solid platinum rank. Again, one of the best indie games I've ever touched. One of the coolest stories I've ever seen in an indie game. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.